Hello, Minister Rehman. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real honor and pleasure that you're able to join our event. Of course, last year's floods were devastating for many millions in Pakistan, and your country really is now on the front line of the climate crisis. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you and your government are working to help build resilience and recovery to these floods?
Thank you very much. First of all, a couple of things. Yeah, it's not a few million or many millions. It's 33 millions to be exact, which is important because this is an unprecedented number of people to be impacted by any climate emergency known to the century or any other for that matter. So that puts the 33 million, the size of about 3 medium-sized European countries, up for multiple levels of interventions, from relief, first life-saving and then relief, rehabilitation, and then reconstruction in presumably resilient lifestyles, as well as livelihoods and shelter that is resilient. So now this is a virtually, I wouldn't say it's an impossible task. It's something that we have had to, just put our feet into and get on with it instead of complaining about the size and scale and magnitude of what ripped through Pakistan. But 1/3 of the country was inundated. And what's happened is that many parts of the south of the country, the topography is still transformed, which means that the water has not left. Why? Because some of it is under sea level, because of rising sea levels. And much of the water was in such large quantities from the sky that it has nowhere to drain. That is the way the land, these are flat lands and they're under sea level. They're not near riverbeds enough. Those that are near the riverbeds already were engorged and they overflew and, obviously created miles and miles of a horizon without land. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen that kind of horizon, which is something actually many of us have never seen before. Inland, we had aircraft as well as Pakistan Navy inland, which is more than just operating small craft. So it is clearly a climate Armageddon that came home to Pakistan, and it was, to my mind, a very clear message that this is an accelerated decade for climate transformations, and that these are not transformations that will leave the country open for any healthy human habitation. So where do we go from here? First of all, we try to bring our people out of those areas. Now, 33 million is a lot to bring out. There are still over 1 million that are living near flood waters, which, as I said, are not receding. There's only so much land to go around. Many people have lost their livelihoods, obviously, and we've lost over 1,800 people. We have also been impacted. There's been an enormous exogenous shock to the economy, which was already debt-ridden. And just the task of recovering and providing relief, just the basic relief, all our funds are repurposed. Every single piece of money for resilience, even from my ministry, which is a long-term planning ministry, has gone towards first needs of, which is a cash dispersal called the Benazir Income Support Program. Now, that's a gold standard program that is recognized internationally as one of the best social protection and most transparent social delivery nets. Now, we had to expand that to cover urgent flood relief, not rehabilitation. And that's where all our financial envelopes have gone. I have to thank all the countries and MDBs and even the UN system that was down there on the ground. They were on the ground, and I don't think without them we would have been able to save enough lives. But the fact remains that once the middle of the crisis has gone, the fury of the waters has abated, the cameras have left, and the question I'm being asked is, what are you and your government doing to deal with it? Well, clearly, we are having to do it alone. And I'm not sure that there is enough money or climate financing, which is a separate thing, and we can talk about how that does not address or respond to the urgency and scale of upcoming climate patterns and disasters in the entire developing world, including South Asia and the rest of Asia. It includes many other countries, including the small island states and Africa, where the time scale of climate events is so accelerated that countries are what, at least I see in my country, what I call a recovery and resilience trap. We are still building, rebuilding with resilience with whatever funds we have and indigenous expertise. But while we're rebuilding, it's April, we are standing in April now, and the first floods of the north have already begun yesterday, which means one of the beautiful valleys of Swat is one of their main roads is swept away. The bridge that was built without resilience, let me say there was no time to build with resilience. That still requires a fair amount of planning and a technical expertise, capacity, and a load of money. We were still rebuilding that. It's over. It's gone again. And this yesterday's flooding. It's just incipient. It's in an area that's not, that knows about flooding, which is the north of Pakistan. There we have riverine floods, flash floods, and also glacial melt. Now, I don't know if you know, Pakistan is one of the country with the largest amount of glaciers outside the polar region. So we have from delta, which can be bone dry or flooded. And in the north, we have these glaciers, which are also rapidly melting. And I was in the office all day saying, well, we need to be expecting and making plans for what is known as glacial lake outburst floods, which have gone up by 300% in the last 2 years. And when this kind of a lake bursts, no amount of planning can stop anything. We are, however, because we are expecting it, used to saving lives. We don't lose lives anymore. We do lose, however, hydel and other infrastructure, the hydel power plants that a community set up in the north because of mountain water. So it's a lot of different things coming at us at the same time. It's cascading heat waves. And we've been the hottest country on the planet 3 years running in the south of the country, 53.7 degrees. Now you tell me, and I'm also in Islamabad bracing for the forest fires, because that's also one of our concerns, that some of the disasters we saw. But we lost last year $30 billion in economic losses and damages, right? That is an estimate by the World Bank. It's a conservative estimate. And they also, while I'm going through our adaptation plans and resilience again in the office today, they also concede that $348 billion is needed until 2030. Not far away, 2030, for Pakistan to keep its head as a development and sustainable index survivor, literally above water. So that kind of money is not in anybody's pipeline, envelope, or plan. So I know that you are asking the conventional questions, but you're going to have to ask very unconventional questions for a time that the country and the world has not seen before. Now, that time has not come to the UK, it's come to other doorsteps, but I would treat it as a postcard from the future if I were you. So the last thing I want to say when I speak to this question is why I'm saying treat it as a postcard in terms of planning, because no climate ecosystem knows any boundaries. So when the weather pattern hits hotter countries first, the wrong longitudes, what it does is it adds risk in unpredictability, and obviously it wipes out years of development capacity. And what that does is creates a whole new apartheid of want and need. And when we have this level of want and need, we also have social unrest and public anger. That is something very hard to address, and climate change then knows no boundaries. I don't mean angry people coming to your shores. I mean then when one ecosystem fails because it is in peril, we are unable to invest the time and resources needed to nurse it back to health, or even say, for instance, nourish our Indus Basin back to health, which I can talk about as an investment project, since that is what you do. What happens is that one ecosystem fails, then it impacts another, sometimes of an ecosystem that is far away. Now, that's how climate science and modeling goes. That's not what the forum is about. So we can talk about more kind of focused topics that are of interest to you, which is climate finance. I assume that's what you want to talk about.
Yes, thanks, Minister. I would love to maybe ask what we could do as a development finance community to really help ensure the investment does get to where it's most needed. But maybe just before that, I just wanted to, well, thank you really for all your work on the climate justice agenda, and in particular, of course, you played a pivotal role in securing the historic agreement for new loss and damage funding arrangements. So I just would love to hear, and I know our audience would love to hear, what are your aspirations for fulfilling that agreement this year? What would you like to see concrete steps this year?
That's asking a kid in a candy store what you're looking for. Okay, but no, I have priorities naturally, and all countries have them. All global, development actors have them. So here's mine. It's not an impossible wish list, but it does lead into one action does lead into another. Now, we were told that the loss and damage fund is impossible to get and secure last COP. All right, we stayed until it was over and extended. And I think the stamina and resilience on the ground of other leaders that were part of our G77 caucus, or rather group. G77 plus China is a very large group of countries. In fact, it is a huge majority. And I convinced them to change their flights and stay back and bring their arguments and their own groups. There are LDCs, there are small island states, there are Africans. So there are all conclaves that work together. And we allied them with our G77 under that umbrella, and we worked coherently with civil society as well as these nation states and these groups. Now, when we realized, I think that the Secretariat of COP27 realized Egypt was clear that we were not going home literally until this was done, until this was recognized as a right. Now, this was really just a moral victory. What people were expecting were pots of money to be transferred to a recurring crisis zone. That's not really happening. And I did write an op-ed in my country before leaving that please don't expect pots of gold from COP27. It's not a financing forum, but it is where a lot of pledges are made. It is where ambitions to cut down emissions are articulated, and where promises are expected to actualize pipelines, right? Now, we've had pipelines in the past, rather funds set up in the past. One is an adaptation fund, global adaptation fund. It hardly yields it's been underfunded. Then you have a climate financing forum. COP is about climate financing at the end of the day. Now, as increasingly as the global South begins to raise its voice and the global North starts to respond, which is mostly historic emitters, you do then have a dynamic which can get combative. And I think that's not what we want, because on a negotiating table, you may have a few points of disagreement and trajectories where you feel that our paths are completely at departure. The point is how to build forward, and building forward requires negotiations and sitting across a table. So being combative doesn't help that. However, stating your case is crucial. And sort of not being a wallflower about it is important. Now, when we say that, what happens is that we saw a lot of countries responding very positively, countries that had said, please, there's no play in this. It's not happening. Their ministers actually came back. They flew back, because this was a long time for ministers to stay in a country. And then they changed their minds. Now, where we lost out at COP was the emissions, the mitigation work plan didn't really work out, didn't set the kind of targets it needed to. But the developing world, frankly, the global south had put all its energies and stamina into this because it's important to us. So when that was done at the last moment, through many hours of the night, sleepless hours, and may I say there wasn't enough food or water to go around at the center. So creative ways were being were being found to get delegations, or what was left of delegations, fed and sort of, well, it just hydrated. I have to say that in the end, it came together, and it was like a rush of faith in humanity and in global leadership, that, you know, when there's a will, really there is a way. Now, what is that way? You want to know? The committees are very slow to form, and it takes a year before they report back. Pakistan will not be leading the G77 anymore. It's a rotation post. But we hope that the next leader will also be responsive, and we'll play an active role. We have the experience, and we have obviously the stake, the skin in the game. What's important here is that I had said at that time, on behalf of over 130 countries, the night the Loss and Damage Fund was created, that this is a down payment in our future, in our collective futures, because it's not just about one country. And when we make that down payment, that has to mean that certain steps will unroll in the future. That is what a down payment on a house or a mortgage or anything means. Now, those steps are very slow in unfolding. They may and they will have to unfold at some point, whether in the form of this fund or in other concessions and facilities that are set up in response to the growing and very acute needs of the global south, which many countries are debt-ridden. And what they're finding is that much of the programs created to deal with, or in the name of climate financing that are being addressed or coming down to many of our countries, are in the form of more loans. And that's actually a worry, but nobody's in a position to say no to ready, usable resources that have to be sent down to saving lives. Now, that's become a problem. The slowness, the inability of climate green or climate financing to be accessible to a crisis is only actually met by the UN flash appeal system. The UN flash appeal system on its part is completely underfunded. And you can see them, I mean, you can see them wringing their hands and their eyes getting misty when they see the videos from the ground zero of our destruction. And you can see everybody visibly moved. So it's not like there's no lack of emotion. These are not, this is not artificial intelligence making decisions. These are people. So clearly I'm always on the side of human beings here. And there is no money, it seems, in the global country system. It's countries then that feed the UN. It's countries then that feed the GCF and the global, the GEF, the two climate funds that are supposed to generate money. Now, they're all only doing project financing. We are competing for those projects. We are writing those projects, and that we are finding that even if we win those projects at the global, I mean, we may be competing with Germany, for instance, for adaptation financing. And we'll find that if we do win, it'll take anything as much as 1 year to 18 months for project financing to be released, which does not actually shift the needle on large scale needs to turn a page. You're not going to turn a page in a country when you're ticking a box on project financing. Half the time it will be just capacity financing, or it will be financing that is running into 3 districts of, say, climate smart agriculture pilot projects. Their box is ticked. They said, phew, we've done our bit in South Asia, in the worst areas. We've helped the women. It's gone first to gender. So all the boxes get ticked. But it does not meet the onset of egregiously amplified needs now that are that are making vulnerability a death sentence for countries, for communities, for entire nations. There is no vulnerability index, even in the world, other than a German NGO called German Risk Index. So the world of climate financing has no real even social indicators to work with. I mean, yes, you can use other ones, but the vulnerability index is still not done by the UNFCCC. And the climate financing is is almost frozen in aspic half the time. So here we are with the loss and damage fund, yet another fund, which needs to be financed, which needs to be creatively operationalized, which needs to address as executive financing tools should on the ground immediately, but it's not. So right now, it's not addressing any needs. It is that fund on the future, but I'm not pressing for that check to be written that the down payment to be signed. No, but it remains unsigned. Let's be very clear. If we want to speak in metaphors, if we want to cut across the chase, it remains unsigned. And that has been the fate of many such funds. But the loss and damage fund was important to the global south because it recognized one thing. It recognized that the global north has actually, through excessive consumption and overuse of the planet's resources, has created this climate crisis. It's entirely anthropogenic. Please don't blame nature or God for it, as some people tend to. And in this anthropogenic crisis, it has extracted more than the earth right now, the resources are willing to support. What is happening then is that emitters like us, who have less than 1% emission, Africa, which has less than 4%, is facing the consequences. We are paying the rents for, say, another country's irresponsible consumption. And if you're washing your towels too many times, we're paying the rents for that. If you're guzzling gas or burning too much heat and not controlling your CO2 or your methane, we're paying the rents for that. And those rents are not just money, they are in actual lives being given away, in actual children losing their futures, in women and children who were impacted. 70% out of 33 million, the vulnerability impacts of women and children are always the highest, as your forum should know. So the disproportionate impacts are felt on countries nearer the equator, on countries that are less resilient, and we are still waiting for the industrial north to live up to its responsibilities. And I'm always willing to speak to people who have heard our voice and want to help, such as yourselves.
Yeah, well, we've been leading an initiative, Adaptation Resilience Investors Collaborative, to see how DFIs like ourselves can really help to accelerate more, particularly private investment for adaptation and climate resilience. Yes. And could you maybe just say briefly, because I know you have limited time with us today, what could we do more and to help implement and invest in your Pakistan's National Adaptation Plan?
So here's the thing. What you can do is bring in investments to the water management sector, water resources, because water is clearly one of Pakistan's biggest frontline crises. While we have water everywhere, and not a drop to drink, the issue is that by 2025, we could be water scarce. We are glacier fed mostly, yet that water is in, and managing water is a very expensive business. Now, adaptation is an expensive business. $1 without development without adaptation, say $1, and development with adaptation is $1 to $4. So the cost goes up exponentially. And investors can look at, for instance, investing in a range of, we can send you a menu of items. We can do an entire presentation on one focus subject called the Living Indus Initiative, which was something that we launched at the ministry before the great epic floods came and repurposed all our focus, minds, attention, and money in that recovery project. And so that was what we call an axis of adaptation project for the country. Because the Indus River is our lifeline, 80% of people and communities and agriculture is entirely dependent on this river. It cuts across all 4 provinces. It changes face as it goes through from the north to the south. And what we have designed as an investors project for both big public investors as well as private is a menu of 25 living options, in which you can pick anything. It's from 16 to $18 billion, the whole project. But you can pick a number of options. You can pick up one of the least expensive ones. For instance, say community ponds, which build water bodies around the Indus, responsibly managed water bodies for the communities, which are plastic free, which recharge the river basin. It is one of the most polluted rivers in the world now. And so it needs help. Its basin, its aquifer, it's the quality of its water, all of it needs help. Its marine life needs help. It's the sewage that goes into it needs to be treated. So there is a number of investment options, from large scale depollution. The expensive ones are depolluting the river. The less expensive ones are working around or creating plastic free cities around the Indus. And incidentally, all of Pakistan's cities except one, Quetta, is built around the Indus. Like all great civilizations, you build around a river. So just like London is. But so we are clustered around this river, and we need to reduce pressure, the urban pressure and the agriculture pressure on this river. Livelihoods are all related to it. Urban economies are dumping into it. And now we need to clean that river and recharge its aquifers. It's more longer term, of course, than rehabilitation, funding or building. That is going on, and that's a more urgent need. But this too is needed to keep the river and the country afloat. We'd be happy to send you a whole presentation on it. I'd be happy to make it to your forum virtually.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Minister. And yes, thank you for all your work, not only for Pakistan, but all the vulnerable countries and communities around the world.